Larry Williams, what's up, brother? Great to see you. We kind of hinted at this a couple of months ago, and here we are. It's time. We're doing our season recaps. It's the first one, the Clemson Tigers, of course. We're going to kind of start here, and we had to bring you on. Somebody that covers this team as well and as in depth as anybody out there. So there's so many different ways to start, and I think just giving you the opportunity as a head coach gets to open remarks and kind of go wherever you want about this 2025 season and what it was for Clemson from your perspective.
This won't be like a Dabo opening statement. I hope y'all aren't expecting that.
So it won't be
It
20
might be.
minutes
I
of
don't
like,
know.
yeah.
I've heard you talk a lot,
Gosh.
Larry.
Oh
It
man.
might be.
Uh, that could be tough. Pack a lunch. Yeah, like I just there's nothing I can say that's really all that revelatory, I guess. Just, you know, you go into the season thinking that this is a program that looks capable of being in that top 5, maybe top 10 category. And one of the most, I guess, the most interesting, funniest things that we've dealt with at Tiger Illustrated, over the last however many months since the season went sour, which was the first week, is man, how could y'all's sources have been so wrong? About what this team was capable of, and you're talking to the wrong people, and you need better sources. And one of the responses is like, hey, like, you look across the country and the NFL draft experts and the national pundits and plenty of people were in that same boat. And so I think that just underscores just how surprising it was. Not necessarily that this wasn't a national championship team, because I think that was still something that folks around Clemson were a little skeptical of and wary of. But just 1-3, 3-5. Even one of the wins at Louisville. It's like that's one of the ugliest games I've ever seen. You walk out of that game. How did they win that game? It was more given to them, I think, than they won it. Dabo might include me in one of his opening statements moving forward, based on that comment. He might not
Yep.
be, he might enthusiastically disagree with that, but just from the expectation being challenging to win it all, to then at the end of the season, Dabo, taking pride in, being the best finish in Clemson history after a 1-3 start, making history of that variety with a 7-6 record. Just, I did not anticipate that, and I don't know who did, honestly.
There is so much to unpack here, Larry. And I want to start with this, and we're going to get into Chad Morris at the end and talk about kind of the future, but let's focus on what happened. And one of the reasons why this season was such a dud is because the offense did not look like we thought it could. Cade Klubnik as a Heisman finalist, potential, someone had him as the number 1 overall pick. I forget who had him as that. And that obviously did not happen. How much of that was Cade had maybe hit his ceiling and he regressed a little bit? Or was it the Garrett Riley of it all and play calling? Like, what were you able to glean about why the offense wasn't able to be great, frankly?
Well, I think part of our culture and society these days, whether it's sports or politics or whatever, there has to be one thing, and everybody argues over one thing or the other, sort of competing against each other. And I think the story of the offensive side of the ball this past season, it was a lot. It was multiple things, and I think that I'll go sort of forward to go back, in referring back to Dabo's most recent press conference when he introduced Chad Morris, when he said that it all starts with running the football, and that really plays a lot into your third down percentages that were, I mean, both of those statistics, rushing offense and third down conversions, were the worst since 2010, the worst of the Dabo era. And so I say that to say, like, I don't care if it's Fernando Mendoza back there. If you don't have and Eric, this, I mean, this is not a great revelation. If you don't have a running game to really lean on, then you're kind of cooked in a lot of different ways. It just trickles down in a negative way from there. But I will say this, like, I, as I as you go back and you think about, okay, first pick of the draft, Heisman Trophy, Klubnik, this and that, and there was so much promise that came from his performance in the last act of 2024 at Texas, when you saw a glimpse of the great offenses of the past. You saw a glimpse of what they could be, what Garrett Riley's passing offense could be, what Cade Klubnik could be, what the receivers could be. And so I think most folks just assumed that not only was going to continue, but they were going to build on that, and that the trajectory was going to continue going upward. I do wonder if, the Cade Klubnik that you saw early in the season when they were 1-3, also against LSU, kind of that deer in headlights look, that again could be related to, oh crap, we're not running the ball. I got to do a lot of this myself. But that look, I think a lot of those players on that team, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, they remember that look. They were around 2 years before, when Cade was going through his first season as the starter and was just a total roller coaster. And so I think as they prepared for the 25 season, there was so much hope and optimism. Maybe in the back of folks' minds, like the veterans, was, yeah, we think everything's going to be great, but I hope that old Cade doesn't come back. And then in the first 60 minutes of the season, when you do see that, it's like, oh no. And so that's the way that I sort of fairly, maybe some unfairly, in my mind, it's the most logical explanation for why was the defense not as good? Why was the defensive line, not as disruptive? I'm not pinning all that on Cade Klubnik. Certainly there were deeper issues, deeper problems, deeper concerns about where people's heads were, and things that only Peter Woods and TJ Parker and on can answer for themselves. But as you're talking about momentum and confidence, when it's going in the positive direction, it's contagious. I think the same can be true, and maybe was true, of this Clemson team in a negative direction, when you start to see some of the signs that, oh crap, okay, our main trigger man that ain't what we saw last year in the second half in Austin, and not what we thought we were going to get. Does that make sense?
Did you know that Ingles sells more organics than any other store? Or that they run their own dairy? Or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else? Or that they have Energy Smart stores? Or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department? Or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
Yeah, I think it does. And it's such a putt. Like there's a ton to, kind of address there, but I think it was so baffling, exactly what you said, kind of towards the middle back there, about that last game against Texas and how efficient the team looked and how good. I mean, I unfortunately went back and watched that, halfway through the season. And I'm just like, how are we at this moment in time when I just saw that at the end? How do we go through a full off season, a full camp of development and all these things? And this is where we are now versus that. And it, to me, is the most baffling thing, just kind of the year, that you have these unbelievable wide receivers, like guys that would be great number ones anywhere else they wanted to go and could have went, and they stayed, and that's a big deal too, and we'll address that here in a little bit. That's a huge deal, actually. But those guys are elite, and we can't get the ball to them. And when we get to them, maybe they drop it and they're injured and things of this nature. And you mentioned the lack of a run game, and the experiment that was Adam Randall. And listen, selflessness, 100%, awesome move, awesome teammate move. But how do you get to that point? How are you coming off of the best decade ever, and you have to get to the point where your running back number one is a converted wide receiver that's never played the position at this high level? Like, how does that happen from a recruiting standpoint, from an evaluation standpoint, from just trusting who you've brought in standpoint? The offensive line and the veteran group that they are and were, this past year and just supposed to be a real strength. I mean, you guys have seen the tapes that I've done. There's guys running into each other, running the wrong play. And is that coaching? Is that scheme? Is that players not as good as they're supposed to be? A combination of all three. I don't know. So there's so much that went into it that you're just like, what is happening? How is this happening? Why is this? It makes no sense when you look at the talent, when you look at the great coach that Coach Dabo Swinney is, one of the best in the country. Like, how is this happening? It makes no sense. And then the defensive woes, I think really what kind of happened there is you've got a group on the side of the ball that was having to hold up too much, and they couldn't do it, and they got tired of it, and they were put in these adverse situations so many times, and eventually they just kind of broke. So I haven't been in those walls, don't know what those meetings have been like, don't know what the finger has been kind of pointing at a lot of different ways, but it is just such a fascinating thing that it didn't work this badly. Like, it's one thing to win an ACC championship or get to a playoff and lose in the first round or lose the ACC championship. Okay. But to get obliterated by Syracuse at home, to get embarrassed by Duke where they score 40 something points at home, to lose to Georgia Tech on a last second field goal. The bowl game is what it is, but that was a horrible Penn State team, and you lose that in a game that you were very excited to play in. It looks like you don't really want to be there. So, it's a really strange season that I'm hoping and praying is a humongous outlier and something we just forget about in a handful of years, but it's so bizarre. And that was kind of a real big picture point here
Mac,
to
let's ask,
circle back.
and you literally laid it out perfectly. And so that's what I want to ask Larry is like, how does that happen? And do you think it's going to be a one-off? I know you can't predict the future, Larry, but you're pretty much, you're the one who probably can the most. The Tiger Illustrated people would say that. So how does that happen? Like, give me a few reasons why that whole monologue has to happen, and Mac breaking down all the terrible things that have happened.
Dabo, I'll give Dabo sort of his say here. He believed early in the season, and still believes now, I think, that, playing such a big time opener against LSU, when you don't have a warm up, so to speak, you don't have the preseason like the NFL does. He's harped on that for years and years. He thinks their confidence was just shattered after that in some key positions.
And the only, I'm not pushing back to you. I'm just pushing back on the
There's some pushback there for sure.
You got a 4-year quarterback. You got 5 first-round draft picks.
Right.
That was the year that shouldn't matter. I went through plenty of those. Georgia, Auburn, LSU. Like, who cares? Play it. It's part of it. And again, I'm just reacting. I'm not calling out you or him. But that's not. I don't care about any of that because of all the pieces that are there and that are experienced, and it's at home. It's not like this coming year that I do have, something to say about that. That has the potential to be horrific, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, my first reaction to that, and I first started hearing about it in September when they were 1-2, 1-3, is that Dabo just he's starting to sour on these opening big time games, because you don't have that dress rehearsal, whatever. Well, I mean, just look at Penn State, right? Like, they came in almost identical expectations, a ton of talent. Well, they did have the preseason game approach. In fact, they had 3 preseason games: Nevada, Florida International, and Villanova plays football. I didn't even know that. Anyway, they had their warm-ups, right? And they still were exposed. Like, so you are who you are, right? Like, so my belief is that if Clemson did have the desired tune-up game to open, they probably still would have finished somewhere around 7-6, right? And you can't sit there and say what if in the times that did not benefit you without also acknowledging the what if during times that did benefit you. Because, okay, yeah, they were not far away from 10 wins, whatever. But I got news for you. They also weren't far away from 3 or 4 wins. Like,
Yikes.
seriously.
Yeah, Louisville,
Um, down
South
16 to
Carolina.
nothing to Troy. I mean, that game could have gone the other way, right? Like Louisville, even South Carolina. I mean, the final score was 2 touchdowns, but still, that game was, Wade Woodaz's tackle of Lennar Sellers probably the play of the game. If that doesn't happen, that game might go in the other direction. So, and you also asked, is this was this a one-off? Man, I don't know. That is hard to predict. It is impossible to predict what's going to happen at quarterback with Chris Vizina and or Chris Denson. I'll say though, like I just, I think back. Dabo kept talking about 2010. This year, because that's what he remembers. He was the head coach in 2010, his second full season. What I think back to is 2008, 2 years before that, when Tommy Bowden was still in charge. The similarity in the expectations coming in, that team was number 9, but did they really present sufficient evidence in the previous season to build that legitimate hope? They did not. Like, sorry to go have a history lesson here, almost 2 decades
Sure.
almost 2 decades ago, but that 2007 team spit the bit at home against Boston College with a chance to finally win the division. Just totally tripped through the doorway against a really good Boston College team, granted with Matt Ryan and all that. Managed to close the deal at South Carolina the next week, but still they did not get to where they wanted to go. Lost to, I guess, Auburn in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. My point is, like, it was based on a flimsy foundation. That year, and I guess only in hindsight do we know that it was based on something similar this year, because we thought they were going to be good and potentially elite where it matters most, and that is at the lines of scrimmage, offensive line, defensive line.
Yeah.
And it's certainly nothing new for Clemson's offensive line to not be dominant, but it is new for Clemson's defensive line to return what it did, the talent that it did, and to be 4 weeks into the season, having Syracuse come in and just shove it down their throats the entire first half. People want to talk about Syracuse losing their quarterback, and they weren't the same team after that, blah, blah, blah. That's fair. But it wasn't the quarterback who was blocking those dudes in the first half of that game, as they ran right through the A gaps and just shredded them. So, was it a one-off? Man, that's a tough question. I mean, it's hard for me to sit here and be confident and say, "Oh, Clemson's relax, y'all. They're going to get back to winning the ACC and back to double-digit wins." I don't feel that way. I just think it's a big unknown. I think it's possible, but there are so many more variables, it seems like, this year than not just last year, but than in most any other example you can really think of.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. And listen, I think there's a couple of things to factor in. Again, the fact that Coach Dabo Swinney is one of the best. He's the best coach in Clemson history. He's the best coach in the ACC's history. He's all these things. And giving credit where credit is due, but also benefit of the doubt. They'll figure it out, whatever. I think the changes that happened are good. Now, again, we reacted, in a way when it first happened with Chad Morris coming back of kind of like,
What year
and
is
then,
it?
right. But then the more I hear him speak and the more I really think about it and think of what he did, and he wasn't kicked out of Clemson, he left Clemson. And so, all these different things, especially after the press conference and just like really, seeing him and seeing him talk and mannerisms and, kind of controlled aggression, honestly, the way that he was answering some things, I was like, let's go. Like
And
this guy.
confident, which
Yeah.
has been the key word of this whole
Correct.
thing, really, this whole
Correct.
conversation.
Right. And
Identity.
so I do have confidence there in the fact of there will be a difference and he's going to squeeze. And the interesting thing is, okay, the hire happens. Was the hire, to not dilute power? Well, the way that he's talking, it seems like, no, listen, I built this offense. This is my offense. Okay. This isn't the Clemson offense. This is what Chad Morris brought to Clemson. And so I am intrigued a lot by that and just what the control looks like, what he's able to do, what he's able to get out of that quarterback room. Larry, I think you wrote about it or tweeted about it that these quarterbacks might be hitting and might be able to be hit in the spring. I think that's a big deal. We did that in 2014, and that led to some good things there. So there's a lot of different kind of nuances moving forward, and I want to do that because we only have a little bit of time here. Where do you feel about the offense this next season? Let's take quarterback out of it because it is what it is. We've seen him in one start. He threw for 3 touchdowns, 300 yards, no picks. I think that's something to hang your hat on. But where this offense identity-wise will be in 26, what's kind of your expectation or your thought of where that's going to be?
Well, Eric, this relates to your old position group, so I'm fascinated to hear what you think of sort of my educated theories here. So the Matt Luke, Garrett Riley thing, it just didn't feel like it totally matched up. So when Chad Morris was last here, the RPO revolution had not happened, right? So back then, you know, we just had not, college football had not progressed to the point that it is now. I think where it is now, offenses are so RPO heavy and almost RPO addicted. And I'm not saying that necessarily as a sweeping negative. I mean, there's a reason for it because it's been this cat and mouse game. Defenses react to this, then you do that. But it just felt like, particularly in 2025, when you're like, all right, Clemson needs to really be determined and establish the run here, they still wouldn't do it. And I think, Eric, I want to get you to maybe agree or disagree with this. I think that was largely tied to RPO, where, well, coach, you said to run it, but they gave us a pass look, so we spit it outside. And that's essentially a run anyway. That's part of our running game. I know fans get tired of hearing that, where, the little bubbles are actually running plays. Okay, whatever. I kind of think Chad Morris is going to be more intentional. One of his, a big part of the foundation there is going to be like, all right, and where he's going to mesh with Matt Luke theoretically is where, like, all right, let's run the damn ball. All right, do it. Called runs, direct runs, and establish your identity more there as opposed to reacting, as opposed to your play being a reaction to whatever the defense shows you. Not that there's not merit to that. I mean, even when you guys were crushing it, scoring 40 plus points a game, you were still reacting to what the defense gave you. Whether
I agree. I agree
Anyway.
with everything he's saying there. And we think back to the catastrophic plays, game-losing plays in Clemson's last 3 years.
Fumbles.
Some of those have been on decisions. Some of those have been on choices that were called or weren't called, whatever it is. But when I call inside zone, not inside zone tag, there's a difference. When I call counter, not counter tag, there's a difference. And so I am looking forward to seeing that too. And I know, again, I'm gonna get out of the way here, KG, let you get one or two more in. I know a lot of people too were adamant about the offensive line and adding a lot more pieces. I would have liked to maybe seen one, maybe two, but I think this offensive line has a chance too. I mean, when you see the guys that are young specimens that hopefully should be very healthy now, they're going to be bigger, they're going to be nasty, they're biting at the bit for a chance. I think this line too, with that married mindset of run the damn ball, I think that's going to work well with who's coming back and the new mindset coming in, KG.
I love the nuance there. That's really interesting and a great point. And hopefully we see that improve. Last one for me, Larry, because I know you got to go, but this is my kind of overall question and it's more off the field, but we saw Dabo give a 8.5 minute, receipt of what went down with tampering with Ole Miss and all that. It felt like, okay, Dabo's finally trying to use the portal. He's finally trying to do it the right way, and he gets bit because someone else is cheating and tampering. Is the confidence shaken on how to approach roster building? Like, what do you think is the effect of the whole Luke Farrelly situation going forward?
Rollback just dropped their licensed game day collection. Polos, hoodies, Q-zips, custom designed for your school. On game days, we wear rollback, period.
I think it's what made this such a big deal to me early on. This is like a week before Dabo had his showed the receipts in that press conference. It just felt like to me, Clemson, that Dabo, that Clemson, that everybody at the school is viewing this as a precedent-setting like flashpoint, one way or the other, right? Like, okay, NCAA, these are pretty clear rules here that were pretty clearly, blatantly, brazenly ignored. This wasn't like agent reaches out to back channel somebody in a player's circle before the player gets into the portal. This player was already taken out of the portal by virtue of enrolling at Clemson, signing his scholarship papers and all that, was actually in class when Ole Miss's coach, whose
Head coach.
head coach, whose staff and fan base were irate over Lane Kiffin and his staff allegedly doing the same thing with their. It's just like it's crazy, and so like it just felt like Dabo is saying like, all right, man, this is kind of like my last stand. I'm not saying like he's going to hang it up if if things continue to go in this direction, but it was like his Jerry Maguire kind of manifesto. Some other folks have come up with that comparison. I thought it was really funny and apropos. But it's like, all right, but I think he speaks for a lot of people, right?
100%.
Like, and the national sort of groundswell in his favor
Was interesting.
It was
Yeah.
fun.
I'm not
Felt cool.
shocked. I'm not shocked, but I am kind of surprised at how
Yeah.
almost, I don't want to say unanimous, but when you have even Dan Wolken is sort of getting behind, that's that's an event. That's
This
a
is
news
the one
event.
thing that can unite us all.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
That's right.
How
That's
about
right.
this, Larry, before you go? Is anything come of it yet? Like, is there anything that you know? Is anything happening? Is Ole Miss getting the death penalty?
Will
Like,
the
what's happening?
NCAA do anything?
Right.
Not that we've been able to pick up, but as has been reported, Fresno State has joined the
Right.
party, alleging that Ole Miss came after their top receiver, and so I think the more that it comes out from other locales as well, as Zebo was calling for, hey, coaches, don't just say it privately, in our little groups, like have the guts to come forward and not just stand up for yourself, but stand up for structure of the entire system or wherever it's headed.
Yeah,
So.
no doubt. We'll see. It'll be fascinating. Larry, thank you for your time as always. This was a nice therapy session, I think, for everybody. We'll talk more about 26, maybe post spring. I don't know. We'll just
Sounds
keep
good.
bringing you
Anytime.
back on all the time.
Anytime.
Checks in the mail, Larry.
Appreciate y'all.